In this video, we're going to be upgrading the entire fuel system on my RX-7. But first of all, let's go back to where it all started. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the last big upgrade we're going to do to the FD before it's ready to go back to the dyno, back to Raceonly to complete its tune. Now, my goal for this car has always been to build a reliable club sprint spec car, never to pump out huge numbers, but something that will scare me every now and then, something I can do laps and laps in at the racetrack. Now, I have a goal of about 300 to about 350 kilowatts, and that's on pump gas. I have been really on the fence about E85. I have had E85 before, but for me, it just doesn't feel like it's worth the hassle, especially with this power goal. So I'm planning to stick on pump fuel with a stock ignition, and let's see, maybe we'll make it, maybe we won't. Anyways, let's look at what's on the bench. So here are all the parts we're going to be installing. Now, with the power goal we have in mind, we're going to be doing what's called a secondary fuel rail and injector upgrade. Now, if you're not familiar with the rotaries, they have a staged injection system, meaning there are two pairs of injectors. You have the primary injectors, which are always adding a constant flow of fuel into the motor. It's kind of responsible more for idling, for cruising, and the secondary injectors are responsible for adding fuel under load, and they are the injectors we're going to be upgrading. And we're going to be upgrading to these puppies. So this is the ID2600 XDS. And I've opted for the short length injector, and I got these from Raceonly, and Omar's also kindly sent me these plug and play pigtails. So this end will just go into the FD loom, and this end straight into the injector. So nice and plug and play. Supplying the injectors, I have not one secondary rail, not two, but I have three fuel rails, and I'm going to show you guys why I chose the Raceonly billet rail. All right, so let's start with the Aeroflow Gen 1 rail. Now, this Aeroflow rail just looks like a piece of alloy with some holes drilled through it. It's a very generic style of fuel rail. And these are well known to have poor fitment on the rotaries. And you really don't want a fuel leak, especially because the fuel rail sits directly on top of the exhaust manifold. And I have seen some setups where people have actually modified this bracket just to get the fuel rail to sit properly. I've seen people bend them, cut them. It's definitely not what you want to do. So yeah, definitely not for me. And conveniently at the same time, Aeroflow released this Gen 2 rail. It looks a lot more thought out for the FD, and what I didn't like about this rail is the way you mount it and bolt it down. It's just with the washers and some bolts. So yeah, I think this design is definitely an improvement, but not ideal still. And in order to run this style of fuel rail with the FD just as a step-up fuel upgrade, you're gonna have to run this fitting and then the banjo bolt. And of course, I have ended up with the Raceonly Ability fuel rail. This is designed specifically for the FD, and Omar's just released this recently. One of my favorite things about this is actually it's perfect for the step-up fuel upgrade. You can see this port is actually matched to the banjo fitting of the primary hose. It is completely plug and play. You don't need any adapter fittings, and yeah, perfect for someone like me who does like to tinker. Got a lot of different ports and plumbing options, which is great. And at the end of this rail, I've optioned to get the -6 fitting, so I can bolt my fuel pressure regulator This is the FPR 1200 directly onto the fuel rail. And we're going to be using -6 lines to match the factory lines. For this power goal, -6 is plenty. It's more efficient than -8 at this stage. And in the back of the car, in the fuel tank, we're going to be installing the Radium Engineering fuel pump hanger surge tank kit. This kit is rated to 1,000 horsepower, so plenty for my FD. But before we get into that, let's get stuck into this injector upgrade. All right, the fuel injectors live under the intake manifold, so this whole intake side is going to come out. So with the intake off, we have a really good view of the whole injection system and great access to those injectors. And I thought I'd give you guys a quick orientation. So there are 3 hard lines. They come from the fuel tank, a feed, a return, and a breather. And these hard lines travel towards these fuel rails. And we'll start off with the primary rail there. Those are the 2 primary injectors, and they inject fuel directly into the center plate. And then the fuel travels through the rubber hose to that banjo fitting on the secondary rail. Now that is what we're going to be upgrading, and those 2 secondary injectors, they inject fuel directly into this lower intake manifold. And we have great access, so it doesn't really need to come off, but for the purposes of the video, I'm going to drain fuel and then remove that lower intake manifold. Jeez, that's tight. Alright, so I've got the lower manifold on the bench, and I'm really glad I pulled it off the car because, as you can see, there's a bit of a carbon build-up here. So it's likely that I had a vacuum leak. Now I knew there was a vacuum leak, but I wasn't thinking it was the lower manifold gasket. I actually thought it was going to be the upper manifold gasket. So I've got both coming, should get them pretty soon. And what we're going to do tonight is replace this secondary fuel rail, and we're going to maintain the stock orientation with the feed coming in through here, the fuel pressure reg at the end of the secondary rail, and then the return back to the hard line. So let's get everything off this manifold, and then we can start fresh. All right, so we are starting fresh, and Omar's also sent me this ACV block-off plate. So if you've removed the air pump, this is a good opportunity to block this off. We'll get some gasket maker, and yeah, just, oh, this is new tube. Just some gasket maker. Just found this at home. Didn't even know I had it. So next we're going to install the injectors, and the kit comes with these 2 injector adapters. So I've taken out the stock diffusers, and we're going to replace them with these adapters. Just grab a bit of lube. And our injectors. Ooh. Just making sure the O-ring isn't pinched and you've got a nice seat. There we go. Yep. Beauty. All right, and now I'm going to be installing the rail, and depending on what length fuel injector you have, will correspond to the spacer. So this is a 34mm injector, and the spacer is just going to sit right there between the rail and the manifold. So once again, just making sure the O-ring isn't pinched. And I'm going to gently, ever so gently. All right, I've got it sitting in there. I'm going to add my washers. Got to get the Raceonly logo to face outwards. There we go. And finally, our bolts. All right, so before I go ahead and tighten this rail down, just making sure I have a good amount of play. Firm, not tight. I'm going to tighten this down. Looks really nice. Unfortunately, it all sits under the upper manifold, but at least we know it looks good under there. I've got the fuel pressure reg mounted as well. I really don't like this vacuum line. I could probably tee it up to the upper manifold, but yeah, I'll just leave it for now. Got the sensor installed as well, and that's going to be my fuel return. So tomorrow, what's left to do, just put the manifold back in, and then I can start making my hose to the hard line, and that's the front sorted. Then we move on to the back, and then we can start installing our surge tank. Alright, so earlier today I actually went ahead and sorted all this out. I really need it done because this weekend the weather's looking great. I want to take it for a drive. And yeah, I will run you guys quickly through everything I've done since the last clip. If you were paying attention when I was mock fitting it on the bench, I actually got the outlet wrong. So the fuel return hose is always going to be sitting at the bottom of the fuel pressure reg. So I've got a speed flow 90-degree fitting there. Runs through a 6-6 hose to a hardline adapter, which was a mission to do. You've got to essentially put an olive on the hard line, the fitting over it. Actually, first of all, you got to cut the hard line, then you got to put an olive onto it in the fitting, and there's just no room in this engine bay. I managed to do it from the top, which I could do with a Dremel tool. So yeah, back to the fuel pressure reg. I've mounted the fuel sensor directly onto the fuel pressure regulator. It isn't recommended, but we'll wait and see what happens. It should be okay. And the reason I've got the fuel pressure reg on such an early angle is to clear that little vacuum nipple on the top here. Otherwise it's going to hit the heater hose hardline. So after that was all sorted, I actually went ahead and primed the fuel system just to make sure there were no leaks. And of course there was a leak, and it was coming from the banjo fitting. And you know what? I'm probably just very, very unlucky, but this is a brand new copper washer. Not sure you can see, but I'm gonna throw it up on the screen, a little picture. And there is an indent on this brand new copper washer. So I was just squirting out the side. I chucked a new copper washer in and it's sweet. There are absolutely no leaks. And what we're going to do next, throw it all back together, and then we're going to do some settings on the Haltech. This afternoon we are working on the RX-7, and we're going to be installing the rest of our fuel system upgrade. So we're going to be upgrading to a Walbro 525, just the single for now. We're going to be installing a fuel surge tank from Radium Engineering and also their fuel filter relocation. Now the RX-7 for me is a circuit car, so it needs to be able to handle low fuel runs and also have enough fuel delivery. Now the capacity of the FD tank is about 80 liters. So if you can imagine, on a low fuel run, I'm carrying about 50 to 60 liters of fuel because I really don't want to starve the engine. Now with the fuel surge tank, I should be able to knock off about 20 to 30 kilos in weight just in fuel. So that's going to be a huge upgrade for this car. Now I've decided to go for the Radium Engineering fuel surge tank kit. Now the beauty of the RX-7, well, the downside of the RX-7 is that it doesn't have much cabin space, but the beauty of this is that it's got a really large opening at the fuel tank. So you can actually fit quite a large capacity container with the hanger inside the tank. So this doubles up as a fuel hanger upgrade, which is going to be great for our Walbro 525, but it does have the capacity to fit 3 additional fuel pumps. Now I'm also going to be installing the fuel filter relocation. So this is the stainless filter from Radium. I believe you can also get glass, I think, or paper. I don't remember what they offer. But the reason for this is because the fuel filter actually sits really high up, somewhere in there above the diff. So it makes it really hard to service. I don't know if it's been changed before. So we're going to do this for serviceability and also to make sure we have a fresh filter. So yeah, let's get into it. So at the moment, I'm just going to take out the factory fuel hanger. Fuel pump looks new. So with the hanger out, now's a good time to have a look at the contents of our fuel tank. And I'm happy to report that everything looks really clean. And yeah, it's in good nick. Based on the Radium instructions, they say that we need to remove that silver baffle. So that silver baffle apparently comes in the S8, and there's a couple in there, but we're just gonna have to remove that middle one. So this just came out of the tank in this orientation. So just be mindful there is a tab on the back here. So there is 3 which are pretty easy to see. You simply just push it down, make it nice and straight, but there is one hidden behind the back baffle, which is on this end over here. So just push that baffle back and you'll be able to bend back this part of the baffle. So this is the factory fuel pump hanger, and just on observation, it looks like this fuel pump might be quite new. It's got TI Automotive printed on the fuel pump, so it's probably a Walbro pump, and the filter is very clean. So I'm gonna keep this, I'm probably gonna keep it for my Civic. But based on the instructions, and by the way, the instructions are really good, I'm also going to take this fuel level sender and I already have a new gasket for the surge tank. So let's get the sender off and we can start preparing the surge tank. So we've come to the stage where we're going to start to assemble this fuel surge tank, and I just wanted to take a minute just to appreciate the beauty of this kit. Everything is just so well engineered, the finish and the quality of the kit is second to none. It is so well designed. The whole kit actually is very complete, and it even comes pre-assembled. So it's been very easy so far. You know, I feel confident with wiring, but everything's already done for me. I really like the layout of the bulkheads. Everything has its place, and yeah, I'm not just selling it. I paid full price for this kit, so it is worth every dollar so far. Off camera, I've gone ahead and assembled the hanger side of our fuel surge tank, and I thought I probably should explain how this works. Now, the reason for this upgrade is to ensure that my primary fuel pump, the fuel pump sending fuel to the engine, always has a constant supply of fuel. So this hanger actually sits inside a little sub tank. I shouldn't say it's little, it's probably about 2 liters in capacity. And there's a lifter pump which we install at the base of the fuel tank, which will draw up fuel into the sub tank to make sure this Walbro 525 has a constant supply of fuel. And you know, we want to make sure we minimize any possibility of a drop in fuel pressure from factors like fuel slosh, or even just not having enough fuel in the tank. And you know, it will happen in this rotary. It is a very thirsty engine, and we want to reduce the risk of some sort of catastrophic damage to the engine. So yeah, again, I'm using the Walbro 525, just a single pump for now, but I do have the option of adding an extra 2 pumps if I ever need to do that. Now with the bulkheads, again, I wanted to show you, it's a metal stub which goes through this hanger, and yeah, all the wiring is ready to go. So you've got the sensor wiring here, got power to the lift pump, which we'll get from the factory fuel pump wiring, and the Walbro, which we're going to wire in a new circuit for. So for now, we're going to prepare the lifter pump for this baffle bracket that they supply. We can drop that into the car, and then we can get this surge tank sitting in there ready for wiring. That's what's left of this hanger, and I'm actually going to go and chuck this back on the car because I'm getting high off these fumes.
2,000 years later.
Says what?
It's been another month, and today I am predicting we will be able to finish this fuel system setup because there's a little cars and coffee meet tomorrow morning near my place, and I really want to go. So I've also booked in my tune for later this month because you know what? I think I just need a date and time just to make sure I finish everything and I don't just keep procrastinating. So off camera, I have gone ahead and assembled the lifter pump inside this baffle. Now this baffle sits inside that little yellow tank where we removed the stock baffle, and there's a little check ball valve here. It opens and closes on decel and acceleration. I've also gone ahead and installed the sub tank with a sensor and a new gasket onto the hanger. So I'm anticipating everything should be very straightforward. We'll drop in the lifter tank and then the surge tank. Once we do our wiring, this car should be all systems go, and we can probably take it for a drive today. Fingers crossed.
I met this girl, she was a masterpiece, like Michelangelo designed her outlines. A rarity, I rarely see a gem among the graphite. Her soul is soft as snowflakes that descend and cover alpines. Not perfection, but the right kind, the kind to rest in my mind. I meditate on memories, I feel that she's the right type. I take my time to know her more, know her mind, know her thoughts, know where she will see herself ahead of time when future calls. We resonate on favourite films and how life is more than dollar bills. Though we still need our feel, along with global rendezvous, the va-va-voom, the love and thrills. Communication, we agree that's an essential skill. And both acknowledge that we've had our share of training wheels, dodgy deals. And times we felt like hiding deep like Navy SEALs. After make or break ups that were tense and had us missing meals. But I can't miss the fact I see a future with her still.
So the surge tank is in, and man, it actually was quite fiddly because the sender unit for the float, the fuel level float, sits on this side of the tank and it doesn't really clear the fuel tank itself. So what I actually did was loosen the sender unit. I dropped that in first, and once I shimmied the surge tank in, I was then able to tighten it again and drop the rest of the surge tank in. You still need to pry a bit with like a flathead, but it gives you a lot more room to move if you loosen that sender unit. Yeah, so good luck with it. The instructions do tell you what to do, but you're just gonna have to find a way to get it in there. Hello. Okay, so this is what I've come up with. Now, before I go ahead and show you that, it makes life a lot easier to disconnect the fuel pump harness from underneath the trim there. Bring it over to the bench and you will save your back. The 5 wires which used to go to the fuel pump hanger, I've added these 5 ring terminals there. These will go to the bulkheads on the new Radium hanger. So I've added 2 new wires for the new Walbro 525. Of course it draws more amperage, so you definitely don't want to use your stock wires. And it just runs through the grommet over there, through the harness to my fuel pump relay. And I've put my fuel pump relay over here, just in the location where the old washer bottle used to be, and it's in a good spot to get power directly from that battery. And yeah, to trigger the relay, I've used one of the taps which they provide. I'm not a fan of these usually, but it seems pretty sturdy. And just a bit of conduit and it'll go behind the trim here and be protected from any rubbing.
But I can't miss the fact I see a future with her still. Please let me know how you feel. Know what we have is real. Took me some time to search through my mind, refine a view of you in my life. Let me know how you feel. I know what we have is real. Took time for both.
Alright, so here's the first start. I've just been hammering it out in the past few hours. Fuel pump is very loud. Just priming it a few times. All right, here we go. So earlier today you would have seen that we got the FD running and then we had a huge fuel leak which actually shut the car off. Now the rubber hose on the hanger plate, the feed hose had popped right off and just pumped fuel everywhere. I am reusing the rubber OEM lines and I believe they're just not as compliant. So I've swapped out the clamp. I put a band clamp on there and just cranked it all the way down. It's sweet now, I've taken it for a drive. So I realized I haven't had a chance to show you guys where I ran the wiring. So just briefly, for the fuel pump relay, the supply, I'm running it off this isolator, so every time I switch it on and off, it'll also switch on and off that fuel pump relay, which is sitting behind here. All the wiring I am running with the factory harness, just to keep everything a bit neater. The trigger for the fuel pump relay I'm getting off the factory fuel pump wiring, which is now powering the lifter pump, which means that I'll always have 2 pumps simultaneously running. And yeah, everything was very straightforward to wire. It just took a lot of time. So I don't really feel much of that. So tomorrow morning, we're probably going to go to this Cars and Coffee meet, and if I do, I will bring you guys along. But the FD fuel system upgrade is complete. At the front, we upgraded the injectors to the 2600s with the Raceonly Billet Goodness fuel rail. I love the billet parts. And at the back, we upgraded to the Walbro 525 fuel pump, and we added a surge tank just to be track safe. And I want to give a shout out to Omar from Raceonly for being super helpful with all the feedback and advice on this car. With the rotary stuff, I still feel like I'm going in blind, just being my first rotary build and just having Hondas in the past. I still feel like I'm kind of making it up. So yeah, it's really great to have someone who's been giving me good advice. And I want to thank you guys. You guys make this channel, and you guys are watching all the way to the end. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Now, in the background, I've been designing some shirts for you guys. Just a limited run for the original subscribers. Once they're gone, they're going to be gone forever. So stay tuned for that. That's it for the video. If you have any questions about anything, let me know in the comments. And in the next video, we are going to be taking the FD to the dyno to complete its final tune. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we're going to send this car to the moon. See you then.